Hello everyone, Justin here again, another video for JSG Watches. This time around we have a TIMEX. TIMEX being a big name, everyone's heard of a TIMEX I imagine. And this is the first time working on a TIMEX. So first things first, with this watch we can see that the hands have fallen off. This seems to be quite common with some of the watches I've worked on for some reason. How that happens I have no idea. But this watch is also from the 1970s. Specifically, this is an M25 movement. So you have the M24, M25. The M24 is without the date. The M25 is the same movement but with the date. And this one made in 1975. We can tell that from, if we look at the bottom of this dial, we can see the code, and the last 4 digits is 2575. So the 25 refers to the movement number, the movement model, which will be the M25, and the 75 refers to the date of manufacture. We also saw, when I took the case back off, we saw made in Great Britain, which I understand that TIMEX had a factory in Aberdeen in Scotland, but that did close down in the 90s due to strikes and just due to not being able to resolve their issues. But this movement also, we'll see later on, has also got Taiwan stamped on it. So I believe maybe it was assembled, or some of the parts come from Taiwan also. So this one a bit of a hybrid, half from the UK, half from Taiwan. First thing that we can see unusually is the dial, to get this dial off. So anyone that's worked on a TIMEX movement from this era, you'll know that they were built as simplistically as you can get. So this particular watch only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. 5 screws in total for the whole thing. These movements are a feat of design genius. These are designed and these are manufactured to be low cost. TIMEX are also renowned for being able to take quite a bit of abuse. TIMEX actually had a tagline of "takes a licking and keeps on ticking," which for the non-natives out there, taking a licking means it can take abuse, it can take a beating, which this one looks like it's had quite a rosy life, to be honest. So this one doesn't look in too bad shape for the age. But because of the simplistic design, as simple as this movement is, any engineers out there that have done modules in design, what they've done to design this is just eliminate anything that's unnecessary. So we saw the dial itself, normally they're held on with some sort of retaining screws, but this just had some metal flaps folded over. They've eliminated anything and everything that they can, and this is made as simple as possible to keep costs down. This is by no means an expensive watch, but quite an interesting one. For all the watchmakers out there, and anyone looking to get onto the horology journey, these movements are renowned for being absolute nightmares, because taking it apart is one thing, but putting it back together, which we will see, is a complete different story. These things are a different beast. These are, because of the simple design and the elimination of a lot of components, everything is sandwiched in between 2 plates, which in order to reassemble you have to realign everything, and everything has to align up perfectly before you can screw everything back down, with the few screws that this thing does have. But we'll see that later on. What I'm doing here, we'll just continue with the disassembly. We can see that there's a bit of, this thing isn't the cleanest, so probably hasn't been serviced ever. Why would you? These things were designed not to be serviced. Fun fact, TIMEX actually said if you need to service your TIMEX watch, then just take the dial off and dip it in some lighter fluid, let it dry, and then put it back together. We're not going to do that today. We want the challenge. This watch is definitely going to test the limited skills that I have, but I'm up for the challenge. I'm up for taking this thing apart. I'm not going to shy away. I'm going to strip this thing down to the bare bones. So as mentioned earlier, I did say that this movement only has 5 screws in total. To indicate where them screws are, we have 3 screws on the main plate, 1 to hold in the crown wheel, 1 here to hold in the date wheel retaining spring, and then 1 just on the main plate itself. This sandwiches both the main plate and the top plate together to hold everything in position. The remaining 2 screws, 1 is in the balance wheel, so we can see here this bronze wheel here. This one is actually to adjust the fit of the balance wheel. So if it's sloppy, you can tighten it down, or if it's too tight, you can loosen it off. The final screw is a shouldered screw for the adjustment arm, for when you pull the crown out or push it in to click between either motion works or winding the mainspring up. We're ready to flip this thing over, take that plate off and see what's inside. I'll just flip it over using a sort of a case cushion, and then we can get into it. And there she is. Removing the trainer wheels here and keeping everything in my dust cover. And we can see, first thing that I see that's a bit weird, the barrel itself. The barrel doesn't even have a cap. I suppose, do you even need a cap? The main plate acts as a cap in some sense, I guess. Process of elimination. Let's try and keep costs down. Do we need a cap? If not, take it out. Another thing, look at this pallet fork. Insane. We can see on the main plate here, it's got a stamp, it's got a marking saying no jewels. So the complete watch has no jewels at all. Everything is just, not even bushing, it's just direct pivots through steel. That is as complicated as these things get. But this assembly almost done, and we can see this watch is very simple, not many parts. However, the few parts that it does have, will we get them back together? So I'm a bit nervous, but let us see. So we see the markings here. It says no jewels, and then the plate actually says Taiwan. Onto the barrel, we're going to take this spring out. We're going to take the barrel arbor out and the spring, so we can put everything in the ultrasonic cleaner to give everything a nice clean. But I'm just going to manually take this main spring out of the barrel now. And there we have it. This spring, one of the older designs, so normally the new spring design looks a bit more like an S, just to give it a bit more spring, a bit more tension. This one, the older design with just a helical design, but still does the same job. So now put this thing through my cleaning process, 3-stage cleaning process. And then get everything out to dry, and there we have it. That's the entirety of one of these M25 TIMEX movements. Very simple. So, good news. Got this mainspring winder. And for those of you that have followed the channel for a few videos now, you'd have heard me say that I've never been able to use this thing because all of the watches I've done previously, it just doesn't seem to fit. But thankfully, this is the first one that I've been able to use that it does work, and it worked a treat. It was okay. So it's just nice to know that it wasn't me just being unable to use the tool. It was just the fact that I just didn't have the correct sizes for the size arbors and the size springs that I've previously worked on. But spring back in the barrel, and now we can put the arbor back in. I'll give it a quick twist just to make sure that the arbor's engaging with the spring, and then we can just put a bit of oil on the main spring before we put that aside and we start with the installation. So this is where my heart is going to start fluttering, because it's going to start simple. Hopefully I can align everything go where it should be, but then the challenge is going to be when I try and put the other plate on top to secure everything in position. Will the train of wheels, will the balance wheel, will the pallet fork and the escape wheel stay in position? If I knock one out, not in that sense, but if I knock a pivot out of one of the holes, then I'm just going to have to remove it and restart. But I'm taking my time here. I'm just referring to some photos I took when I disassembled the watch, just to make sure that all of these wheels go into the correct places. And then finally, I've got this tiny pallet fork to go on. But, problem. The order in which I put the wheels on matters. The pallet fork actually sits underneath the escape wheel, so I'm going to have to put the pallet fork on first. Otherwise, I'm just going to knock everything out of position and have to restart it. Here we go, pallet fork on. Escape wheel on. I've got my loop on just to be able to make sure I can see the pivot go through the holes, to make sure that they're aligned properly and everything is meshed and engaged as it should be. Center wheel going on. This one's obvious one because it's got quite a long stem. And that everything's lined up. Everything looks okay. That is the easy part. This 3-piece part here, this is actually for the winding stem, to engage the winding stem with the ratchet wheel. But it's like a 3-part sandwich. So you've got 2 plates and then the cog in the middle. And I'm just going to put a dab of oil on in between these just to help hold them together so that they don't move around, just to make it a bit easier for me to put that in position. But once that's done, time for the challenging part. So I've got this top plate and I'm going to try and line. I'm looking at the balance wheel and I'm looking at that sandwich of 2 plates and the wheel that I put in on the left with the square retaining hole. So because there's no jewels, it's very difficult to see some of these holes line up and whether they line up. So I'm going to give it a quick wiggle and see if I can get this in. I think I'm close, you know. Did I do this first time? Beginner's luck? We shall see. Is there? The center one that's not in. Oh, a little snap there. Okay, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to have a look just to see if I can see them pivots go through the holes. But if we zoom in here, I think we've got it. So problem now is that the screws to retain this plate to the main plate are actually on the underside, on the other side of the movement. So I need to rotate and flip this thing over. But I don't want everything to fall out of position. So I'm going to use some tape, some just some sellotape to tape the plate down to my movement holder. Recheck that I can see all of the pivots through their respective holes. And I'm going to flip this thing over and put in some screws to hold this thing down. But so far, I was expecting this to take a long time. But that was a one bang. That was beginner's luck, I believe. But I've got the tape on. I'm going to put the retaining screws in just so I can take the tape off and then take the movement out of the case to flip it back round to see if we do actually have everything where it should be. But it looks okay, you know. I'm relieved. I can still see the pivots are in the holes, so everything looks to be where it should be. But I won't speak too soon because we've not finished. So I'm going to flip the movement over and I'm going to oil some of these posts. And you can see some of these posts are so small. So small. Again, I guess just to save on material cost. Keep the material weight down. Keep the machining down. So even the finish is not the nicest of finishes. It's quite a rough finish. Just to save on cost. So I've got the ratchet wheel going in, which slides underneath the click, and then I've got this retaining clip here, which you saw when I dismantled the watch initially. This actually rotates on into position, but when I dismantled, I just pried that one off and it jumped out and actually landed in my dust cover. So luckily it landed somewhere I could see it, and I didn't have to get on my knees and hunt on the floor for this little clip. But continuing on, we've now got these cogs here which act as we've got like a plate and the center cog. So the center cog, a plate, and the ratchet wheel in the middle, which I just had to remove the screw in order to be able to put this plate on. And then we've got two intermediate wheels going on, which this plate will then act as a rocker. So when we pull the crown out, it's going to enable us to, it will then engage with the motion works, and when we push the crown back in, it will engage with the winding works. So I'm going to put this rocker back on. Line everything up. And we'll see if we can get this thing up and running. So before I put the screw in, there's actually this shim. So because this lever underneath, this rocking arm, rocks left and right to flip between the two settings, that shim helps act as a rotating plane. But so far so good. Oh yeah, not good. You see this? That rocking arm's supposed to be held under tension with a spring. So I'm just looking for the spring.
That's not it.
But the spring is in the wrong place. It's actually on the other side of the post. And I can't bend that spring underneath that plate. So I've got no choice. I'm going to have to take this thing apart. We were so close. So close. But no choice. So I'm just going to time lapse this disassembly again. Now we've got the scary part of putting the plate back on, aligning it up. Will we be lucky this time, or will we have less luck? We shall see. So just a bit of manual manipulation. And I think we've got it again. I think we've got it again. Let's try anyway. Let's do the tape trick. Flip it over. This time I'm just going to put in 2 screws because I don't think we really need all 3. We just need one either side. Tape off, recheck the pivots, and we're there. We are done. Twice. Maybe beginner's luck twice. Maybe. But now we can just reassemble what we had before. Put that rocking arm back on. And now when we rotate, there we have it. We have that spring where it should be now. So what I can do now is bend that over the rocking arm. And that puts some tension on the rocking arm. So that when we push it in, the spring sends it back. That's how it should look. Previous version, the previous time, not correct. One is them going in, which has a key on the other end. In order to engage with the cog between them, that sandwich of 2 triangular plates, it's got a keyway to ensure that the winding stem engages, so that when you turn the winding stem, it turns that cog, and that cog then turns the ratchet wheel. So again, quite a neat design. Just a process of elimination. If you don't need something, just take it out. Try and make this design as simplistic as you can get it. Reduction in materials, reduction in everything you can imagine. But this thing is coming together nicely. And has not given me, when I first started this assembly, as I mentioned earlier, when I was going to put this thing back together, I was a bit nervous. I was thinking, is it going to go back? Is it going to take me 1 day, 2 days? So far I've been alright, I've been quite lucky. But putting a bit of wind in the watch, this thing should be up and running by now, but it's not. After a little bit of inspection, what I believe's happened, I've just had to put a bit of oil on a bit of grease on the pallet fork. When I cleaned everything, I checked everything and everything looked okay. And what I believe has happened is, after it was cleaned, so we can see the watch is running nicely now, but after the watch was cleaned, the contact between the escape wheel and the pallet fork, there are no jewels there, so it's just direct metal on metal contact. So what I think is just both surfaces were ultra clean, and we're just providing a bit too much friction. So when the escape wheel's rotating, the friction between the pallet fork and the escape wheel maybe was just a bit too high. So I just put a bit of oil on there, and now the watch is up and running nicely. It's got some nice amplitude by the looks of it, which is a relief, because if the thing didn't run, I'd have had to take it apart again to inspect what went wrong. But thankfully, problem solved, and we can continue. Something that's confusing me here is the cannon pinion, which is normally a compression fit. It's normally friction fit and held in position quite firmly. So you normally push it down, push it home, and hear a nice click. This one just seems to be slid on. There's no friction fit there at all, so it was a bit confusing. But after a check, it is as it is. That's just how it's designed, I guess. But reassembly going well. It's not giving me too many headaches. Now the calendar wheel's gone in position, and now we can put the dial back on. This dial, quite a classic looking dial, not to my taste, but it's okay. And as mentioned earlier, the dial held on just with these. It has got three little bits of metal that we just fold over just to pinch it to the main movement. job done. So I'm just going to wind it up now. I'm just going to wind it over just so the calendar flips. One, I'm just checking that it still works. And two, I'm preparing it for the hands. So having a date on this movement, before you put the hands on, you've got to make sure that the date flips over the 1 day to know that you're at midnight. Otherwise, the timing might be okay, but the date's going to flip at the wrong point of the day. So good to know that everything's still working. When I wound the hands round, it's nice to feel everything feels smooth. Everything feels a lot nicer than it did before. So I think maybe before we serviced it, maybe it hadn't been serviced in a long time. We definitely saw a lot of residual and old gunked up oil. So now that that's all been removed and fresh oil put in, the motion works definitely feels far smoother than it did before. And it's nice to see everything moving. Just a little hand check here. Before we can put the case back on. So I'm not sure if this case is the original case. I think it is. It's in remarkable shape for its age. I've not had to do anything to it, and the crystal is clean. Even the case is clean, with very few marks on it. So for a watch that comes from 1975, so what's that? 46 years old, is that? 46 years old. This watch is in good condition. This watch is going strong. And we see that balance wheel is rotating nicely. So now for the real test, once we put this retaining ring in, let's put this thing on the time graph and see how this thing is performing. So on the time graph now, and when we look at the result, horrendous. All of that work and we get that result. The part that gets me is the beat error. The beat error was 9.9, which I know Timex are not renowned for. The old vintage Timex watches are not renowned for being absolute masterpieces in timekeeping, but that result was pretty atrocious. But the thing is running, and it is, as mentioned, 46 years old. So there we have it. There we have my little challenge. My TIMEX M25 from 1975, stripped down and reassembly, which went a lot smoother than I anticipated. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that if you have one of these movements or an M24 on your bench, hopefully this can serve as a point of reference just to give you more confidence to take yours apart and maybe reassemble yours. But I'd just like to say thank you for coming along. Thank you for sitting through the video. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.